Well, pull up a chair and set a spell here at Tales from SYL Ranch Live, the vlogcast that reminds you to always know where your towel is. And I'm your host, Bill Stone. And tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we have the Fandi Masters mini review of the Orville Season 2, Episode 5, All the World is a Birthday Cake. Now, to explain my show, for the benefit of new viewers, the people who might not come in at the top of the hour and give me a chance to get to the review, I do live reviews. Sometimes I do serious films and TV, sometimes I do schlock, and sometimes I do reviews of modern TV or films with a broad appeal, such as The Orville. I will take any and all questions, comments, and nasty remarks. You can tell me if I'm completely full of crap, if I miss something, or if I just happen to be an amazingly hoopy frood, which is probably more likely. I go into a lot more depth than most reviewers. I don't just say whether I liked a film or not. I go into the acting, the direction, the cinematography, and some of the mechanics of making a film. And I can do this because, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was once an actor. So I can speak with some authority. Not as much as a modern working actor, and I never want to give that impression, but with some authority. As they often say, those who can do, and those who can't teach. Now, my Orville reviews are mini reviews. I don't go into the same depth as in my Monday reviews. However, I think you'll find that I go into more depth than other reviewers, both here on YouTube and elsewhere. Hey, Larry, how are you doing? Am I born under a good sign? Well, if I'm on that planet, I sure hope so. I'm a Capricorn. I don't know what that means. I frankly have never once in my life paid the slightest bit of attention to it. So, as a non-spoiler review, I can say on the whole, I really liked this episode. It was a good enough introduction for our new character of Kalea. There is a major cringe in this, and I'm going to make a big deal out of it because it is a big cringe. But it was completely offset because I loved everything about First Contact, which should not be a spoiler since it was in all of the ads. It is so massively different from STD and so missing in Star Trek for a long time, and continuing to prove that this show is a Star Trek where STD is not. So, having done that, I will issue myself a...
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! All hands, prepare for incoming spoilers.
Yes, it is a spoiler alert, and that is because I am a Fandi master, and that means that the fandom is strong with me, and that means that nothing is new, nothing is original, and at worst, I figure it out about a half an hour too early. This is not a boast or a brag. This is sadly where you find yourself after having watched, read, and listened to about 100 years worth of science fiction. You can't see the new stuff for the century that came before, and you find out there isn't that much that's new in the world, and sometimes it interferes with your ability to enjoy things. Not so much exactly with this one. I found some things that interfered with my ability to enjoy it, but not for that reason. So, this episode. Oftentimes, I will go through the plot. I am not going to do that. My assumption is, if you stayed with me past the spoiler review, you do not care if I'm going to spoil it for you, or you just actually watched the thing, and hopefully you did. Hopefully you did. Always like to get my cringe moments out of the way, and as I mentioned, there is a major cringe moment about this, and that's the astrology part. I'm sorry, but that one is just seriously cringeworthy. I know that McFarlane was trying to make an allegory. I get that. But for any species to that advanced to believe in astrology boggles the mind. And by the way, if you believe in astrology, well, full offense here. Girl brain. It means nothing. The stars have precisely nothing to do with your personality or future events. If you are really using astrology to guide your decisions, well, then I have a prime piece of real estate in Florida to sell you. Just make sure you check with your astrologist first, dimwit. Also, the prefect ordering aliens to their own prisons? No. I mean, how do they know that an advanced alien species like they've got orbiting in front of them wouldn't just nuke their cities from orbit until they got their people back? I mean, just telling Mercer to get them off the planet ought to be adequate enough. Larry says, setting up the birthdays out of nowhere before First Contact seemed a stretch. I didn't mind that so much, but the whole the whole bit with astrology. I'm going to get into the science of that in a second. By the way, how can you biologically tell what sign someone was born under, especially aliens? Giliacs, okay, they believe themselves to be inferior and dangerous. Do they have any actual evidence of this? I mean, I don't see any of them going nuts in concentration camps. If they themselves never make any trouble, why should they believe themselves to be inferior? I mean, there should have been, frankly, a revolution over this whole problem a long time ago. Other cringe moments. Would the concentration camp guards not have noticed that a prisoner was pregnant and that the kid would not be born a Giliac, and therefore dragged the mother off to a maternity ward somewhere and taken the baby for its own good? That one sort of stretched the imagination. Some scientific stuff. Microwaves. Microwaves do not travel faster than light. If the Gamma Velorum system is, as they said, a long way off from the Orville, and it took them going at quantum drive to get there, then it should have taken decades and centuries from which it was sent for the Orville to have received it, which is alluded to by the prefect, but is sort of swept under the table. Microwaves do not travel faster than the speed of light. The reference to the planet as Rigor 2 by its planet inhabitants. A species should have their own name for a planet. You never heard the Andorians refer to their planet as, I've forgotten what star it was supposed to be around, but you never heard them refer to their planet as anything other than Andoria. These guys should have their own name for their own planet. It is part of what I have called in the past the original series problem. This is one of those things that was baked into Star Trek right from the beginning and has continued on through the way. One of the things that I have always liked about Star Wars is their planets have names. You know, the Wookiee planet is Kashyyyk. We don't know exactly what star it orbits around. We just know that it's Kashyyyk. And I have talked about the original series problem before. Pull it out as a clip if you want to see. There's a link in the bottom of my description below that will send you over there, and you can take a look at that. Larry says maybe their microwaves travel faster than ours. No, it don't work like that. It don't work like that. They're slower than light technology by a far. You know. One little minor thing. When they had that problem with the C-sect, everybody walks into the ER without being first sterile. Everybody should have been at least issued masks, you know, before they walked in there, even if they weren't going to touch anything, which, by the way, is still problematic. But even if they weren't going to touch anything, they should have at least been issued masks. Then there's the issue of a non-capitalist society. Now, I totally understand because we are on the cusp of it happening with 3D printing, because that's what 3D printers really are. 3D printers are going to be the replicators of the future, and they will change everything about life here on planet Earth. But the notion that you can live off of your reputation alone, this is something that is a Star Trek The Next Generation concept. By that time, Gene Roddenberry had very much fully embraced communism. It is not something present in the original series. In the original series, they did have money. It was nebulous. They used things called credits to buy things. Earth could be Rigel 3 or, Yellow Sun 3. We do not refer to our own planet as Sol 3. We don't do that, and that's why your average... when you make first contact like that, these guys should be referring to their planet by their own name. But the notion of a society that only operates off of someone's reputation. This is a pullover from Star Trek The Next Generation, the Berman era after Roddenberry had gone full communism. It doesn't make sense. It's a dumb idea. What about lazy people? Because there's going to be a ton of lazy people, particularly since replication means that they would literally want for nothing. You want a nice steak, you got a nice steak. You want a nice house, you got a nice house. It doesn't matter with replication. You literally want for nothing. And that's why today's modern 3D printers are going to change the world as they start to mature. They're already starting to, but they will change the world as they go along. In fact, there are some homes that are at this point in time being 3D printed. As the cost for the materials to do so continues to drop, that technology is going to completely change the world. Lazy reputation is my dream. Yeah, and so would a lot of people. So would a lot of people. I mean, you know, if you can have anything you want for almost nothing, or for nothing, what is the incentive to do anything? Without capitalism, you will never reach space because there is literally no incentive to do so. Humanity will not get off this rock without capitalism. The military alone won't be able to do it. They may be able to go out there and do the first exploration, but they won't be the ones to do it. If you want colonies on Mars, you're going to have to pay people for their labor when they're there or to get there. Or I suppose if you're the Chinese and you need to get rid of half your population, you just point a lot of guns at them, tell them to get on the rockets, and if they don't go to Mars, they're going to die. But once they get there, they're going to have to do some kind of work, and you are going to have to pay them, otherwise they won't. A little bit of science. This solar sail they deployed, holy crap, that thing was deployed really close to that planet. These guys have satellites, right, that monitor all the movements of stars. In order for that thing to work, you would have to put it way out there to fool them, like out at the edge of the solar system, and then program it to keep moving around. Or somebody's going to notice because the angle will be wrong. See, we do this all the time on Earth at our current present level of technology. It's how we determine the distance from here to some of the stars. It's by measuring the apparent location from one part of the Earth's orbit, and then as the Earth moves around the sun, we measure the apparent location from another part. And by checking the difference between these angles, then we can determine how far away that star's distance is. We can even do this with simulation programs, and at least one that is open source and that I definitely suggest you use. And that is called Celestia. And there is a link to the URL below where you can download it. It is available in most Linux repositories. It is available for a free download. It is at celestia.space. And yes, I did not know that .space was a top-level domain. If you download that program, you can tell it to turn on the constellations. Okay, so when you've got constellations turned on, you can see all the lines, various lines that are connecting things for constellations. From Earth, it looks totally normal, but try moving to Alpha Centauri. If you move yourself out from Earth to Alpha Centauri, just look at how the constellations change. Then move way far out, and they become just a jumbled, twisted mess of lines in the sky. These are meaningless. They just end up meaningless. It's easy to do. So, the other thing, Larry says, wouldn't their microwaves bounce off that solar sail? Yeah, well, exactly. They said they have a whole bunch of different ways that they can do this. They've got all kinds of satellites in orbit whose job it is to do nothing but watch the stars. As close as that thing was, they should have been able to find that in about 15 minutes. And again, even if that would sort of work, they would it wouldn't fool them for very long. Because as their star moved around, the sun moved around in its orbit, it's going to, become apparent that that thing is stationary, that it's not moving, the correct way that it should with respect to your own orbit. So, it just doesn't make any sense. But do download Celestia if you haven't already. It is a great, great program. I definitely suggest that you download Celestia. It is really wonderful, fun thing to do, and there are a ton of add-ons for it. There are add-ons that you can use that will give you Star Trek spaceships and locales, just a massive number of those. It'll give you Star Wars ones. It will give you Babylon 5, Close Encounters, I'm not Close Encounters, but 2001: A Space Odyssey, Space 1999, and even some that are even more esoteric than that, such as the one that I have here in my background behind me, there is an add-on for Larry Niven's amazing Ring World. What you're looking at here is a picture, a screen cap that I took one time of the Ring World, and it gets in a lot closer than that. You can see, if you're familiar with the book, you can see, you can take pictures from like the Fist of God mountain. You can zoom in to the Lying Bastard spacecraft prior to its crash on the Ring World. You can zoom in to Nessus and the others' fly cycles if you want to. You can zoom into the floating city if you want to. It's an amazing add-on. So do go check out Celestia at celestia.space, and then the Celestia Motherlode, which is also listed at the bottom of my description box. Last cringe moment, a birthday party on the bridge. No, just no. However, there were some great moments that completely offset this, you know, and the first one was First Contact. When they were asking the simple question, is anyone out there? And they got that on the bridge. I have to say that as one of those people who, like many science fiction fans, we have the dream. That was one of those things that brought a tear to this old Fandi master's eye on repeated viewings, and that is damned difficult. I also got a huge kick out of the crew's reaction. The crew, especially with Gordon just practically jumping out of his seat going, oh, baby, this is it. This is what we signed up for. I mean, yeah, this is the sort of thing that a lot of science fiction fans and a lot of Star Trek fans, we have the dream. That is the dream. This is what we would have signed up for had we done that. And that's why this is Star Trek. STD is not. There is no joy in STD, certainly not this kind of joy. I liked Kalea's, one of her first lines, I'm going to mess them up first. I like to see that kind of slang. I think there should be more of that, and frankly, as little technobabble as you can get away with. You know, technobabble to a certain point is okay, but I'm not, don't have any real problems that we don't actually know how the quantum drive works. We don't know what powers it and all that. I'm fine with that. The technobabble we have, quantum drive, faster than light, we're good. That's perfectly fine for me. We don't have to get into much of anything else about that except the quantum drive. It's broken for reasons. We've got to fix it for somehow, so that's okay with me. Am I coming off out there as jerking? I cannot tell from my local monitor here. Yes, Larry, there is no joy in Mudville in Star Trek Discovery and STD. Yeah. I actually will have a little bit to say about STD as I go along here, so later. Also found something interesting, another just a throwaway line where I have to keep looking back to get her name pronunciation right. It was only spoken like twice in this episode. Kalea, she mentioned the planet Izar, and I had to wonder if this is an Easter egg. Because of Garth of Izar, who was in the original series and will no doubt figure very prominently in the Star Trek fan film Star Trek Axanar. I'm curious if that was an Easter egg or just something that was thrown in. So always we call out, yeah, there was a jerky moment. I was afraid there was. I was waiting for my monitor to come back, and it looked like maybe there was. So. I always have to call out our writers. As I always say, you can have the greatest people in the world in front of or behind the camera, and it doesn't matter if you don't have a good script. And here at Seth MacFarlane writing this one, I think I'm starting to be able to tell which are Seth MacFarlane's scripts. They're the ones that seem the most Star Trek-like. And as I say, this one had some joy in it, where again, STD clearly does not. I think it's a well-written story. You know, big old cringe moment about these guys still thinking astrology is a thing at this point in their technological development. You know, astrology was very damn near a dead religion until about the 1960s. Nobody believed in it. It wasn't until the damned hippies came along that people started paying attention to it anymore. For half my life now, there's been an astrologist on the intersection of a couple of major thoroughfares here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Don't blame us, man. I know there was astrologists everywhere. It ain't just us. It just amazes me that this individual can keep their business running, although I have to admit they run it out of their home. But in terms of the writing here was very good. Followed the usual 4-act dramatic structure, had all the stuff it needed to hook you in to get you past the commercials. Really good stuff. And as I say, the whole business with the crew and how they reacted to first contact. That was great. That was really great. That was one of those moments of joy that, as someone who has the dream, as most of us science fiction fans do, really, really enjoyed that. It brings joy to this series, again, where STD has no joy at all, and therefore is not Star Trek. Characters in this, of course, Captain Ed Mercer. Now, the thing to be aware of on this one, the story is not a character story. This is a situational story. We find this situation, we put our people into it, we do to some extent see how they react, but it's not a character-driven story. There's not a lot of character development per se. Larry says there was no chance the two main characters were going to die, and that lessened the peril. Yes, there is that. There is that. You know, going into this, nobody's going to die. It's a problem always with episodic television. Very rarely is anybody actually going to die. And when they're going to leave the show, it's usually so telegraphed. I mean, look at the Doctor, on Doctor Who. We know exactly when she or he is going to regenerate. It is telegraphed months in advance. So we know that the Doctor ultimately isn't any real danger. Same with companions. They telegraph in months in advance when they're going to change. Then we might think at the end of those, okay, well, there might be some real danger that they could die, as they all did in the Capaldi era. But hopefully they're leaving at least on good terms or something, with all their parts intact. But Seth MacFarlane does his usual good job of playing Captain Ed Mercer. Again, not so much a character episode. We don't get character development with him. But it's interesting to see him put in the position of where he's got to be a diplomat. I'm not sure we've exactly seen that before, so that was kind of nice to see. The beautiful Adrienne Pilecki as Commander Kelly Grayson. Again, not exactly her episode per se, but she does get to do some fun stuff. I did enjoy where, after a month, she finally says, that's it, we're done, we're getting out of here, and comes up with a plan, not so effective, sadly, to attempt to jailbreak, but I thought that was good. I thought that worked well. Remember that she did play Wonder Woman in a failed Wonder Woman pilot that's here on YouTube. I didn't link to it, but you can find it. And so when she does that, it's convincing to me simply because I've seen her as Wonder Woman. And for me, I bought her as Wonder Woman. I thought she was okay as Wonder Woman. I didn't so much buy the plot of that. I see why it didn't go anywhere. It was like Wonder Woman meets your usual soap opera relationship drama, sadly. But I did like her as Wonder Woman. I buy her as that. So when she decides to get all hard as nails, I totally buy her. Larry says they heard they just started production of season 2 of The Current Doctor. It could have been. I haven't been paying attention. I know they're not coming back until 2020. As I said before, I just hope that means that Chris Chibnall has learned his lesson about how to write with character development and story arcs, because if they haven't, it's going to be problematic for the show. And then, as Dr. Claire Finn, Penny Johnson Gerald, again, the actress whom I have been following since the Larry Sanders Show way back when. Not her episode, though again, good performance. I just get a kick out of how happy everybody is to be doing a first contact. They just have a shot of her where, just after Mercer has said all decks prepare for first contact, she's running around all just practically giggly, getting her stuff together. I love that. I love that. Thank you for being Star Trek the Orville, because STD is not. And she also does have a little bit of info dump to give from time to time, but it's info dump. It's not characterization per se. Lieutenant Gordon Malloy, played by Scott Grimes. I love his performance here. It's writing. I get it. It's the writing, but still, his jumping up and down. Oh, baby, this is it. This is what we signed up for. Loved that. I really loved it. I love how he's so excited. This is what Star Trek should be. You idiots over on STD, this is what Star Trek should be, and why STD clearly is not. Peter Macon as Lieutenant Commander Bortus. Again, not so much his episode, but he does get a couple of very good moments in. His whole reaction to the notion, he's a pretty stoic guy. He's a stoic guy all the way around. But his reaction to not wanting to have a joint birthday party, I thought was a lot of fun. And, when he and Kelly are in the concentration camp, and the first thing that happens is that one guy tries to steal additional rations that the pregnant woman has, and he just walks up to him, stares him in the face, and tells him he's not going to do that. Go away. It's hard for a guy like that. It's hard for anybody to act through all the appliance he's got. But his just absolutely dead still stoic body language while he looks that guy in the eye. Sold it. Just sold it. A lesser actor might not have been able to sell that moment through all of that appliance, but he does. Then there is Jay Lee as Lieutenant Commander John Lamar, barely even in the episode, about 3 lines of info dump and 1 reaction in engineering. Again, great deal, great when they do that. Everybody in engineering is just thrilled. This is what they signed up for. If I was doing this, that's what I would be signing up for. Not so much fighting the krill, but for exploring strange new worlds and seeking out new life and new civilizations. And that's why this show is a Star Trek and STD is not. Mark Jackson as Isaac. Well, again, about 3 lines. His main purpose in this episode is to be a catalyst for the info dump. He's the guy who has the slightest understanding of what this astrology thing is, and so has to have it explained to him, which is probably a good thing in a way. Hopefully, the absolute majority of the audience watching this doesn't believe in astrology. They probably have heard of it, but hopefully they don't believe in it. Hopefully it's something that most people confuse with the word astronomy. A lot of people do. A lot of people think of astrology, astronomy, same thing. He was there for that bit of info dump, and that's really all he was there for. I have to mention, too, I have not really given it have enough credit, by the way. There's a guy, again, totally covered, and even worse than Bortus, because every single part of his body is covered, including a face that cannot possibly be emoted through, no matter what you do. It is all body language for him. It is, to some extent, a little bit robotic, but... And it still kind of works. He can still do stuff with his body language that communicates things that's going on in his head, even though he's pretty unemotional. He can still have things going on in his body language, particularly his hands. I have started to really notice what he does with his hands and how he moves his hands and his arms and his fingers. Very good. It's pretty good performance. And when there's another, get into the news I'm going to talk about there. It'll be a little different. But I haven't given him enough credit for being able to act through all of that. So then we have our newcomer. As Lieutenant Talakalea is Jessica Czar. Now, it's just the first time we've seen her on this show, so I'll run through her IMDb real quickly. She is active 2003 to 2019 with 2 in post. Larry says, the captain told the leaders that they were lucky a friendly ship responded to their transmission. Yeah. I mean, what if they'd been lying? What if they just said, hey, you kidnapping our people, that's an act of war. We're going to start bombing your major cities from orbit until you hand them back over. How do these guys know they won't do that? How do they know? Just because they said they were nice people and had a beginning of a very nice dinner with them? Why? Why would you assume this? I would be like, you brought these people here, get them the hell off the planet. And by the way, we're going to check out the rest of you before we let any of you else come down. That would have been it for me. If I was the prefect, I would not have been taking the steps of sending them to their own concentration camps. That seemed way over the top to me. Anyway, as I said, got to get back to this because I had to look up how to pronounce her name. Fortunately enough, I can read and speak the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is what you see on IMDb when you see the pronunciation of words. Jessica Zohr. Her IMDb 2003 to 2019 with 2 in post. She has 40 acting credits, is credited for 10 episodes of The Orville, but obviously that'll be later this season, and has one of those that turned into 83 episodes of Gossip Girl, 12 episodes of Shameless, and 10 episodes of compilations with a mix of film and TV. Larry asks, I wonder what location they filmed. I don't know. I mean, the problem with all of this, whenever I get into special effects is, I mean, obviously there's a lot of CGI in this one. You got CGI for all the cities and all that, but you never know what's CGI and what's not. I wouldn't be at all shocked if, places where they shot things that appeared to be outdoors were maybe sets married with CGI. You can't tell anymore. It's all achieved in post. I can't tell. There's no way to know. That's just how good their special effects are. And Jessica Zohr has won no awards. In terms of performance here, I'm not really quite sure what to say. It will be interesting to watch as time goes on. The character sort of seems a little bit like an older, more self-assured Alara. College campus? Could have been. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they shot someplace for real. Maybe they shot on a sound stage. Maybe they shot on a patch of grass out in back of the Fox studios. Who knows anymore? There's just no way to tell. I'd have to be behind the scenes production to know that information. There's no way to tell. But as I say, this character almost seems like an older Alara. Not the actress's fault, that's the writer. She plays it very self-assuredly, and I like that. That one line where she's grabbed that guy by the neck, shoved him up against the wall, is told to put him down, and says, "It's your lucky day." That is not necessarily something we'd hear Alara say, so I kind of like that. Given that this actress, and I don't know much about the shows, but I would have to guess that she maybe has played sort of a lot of bitch girl roles in some of those TV series. I don't know them, but I mean, when you get into TV series that have names like Gossip Girl, Shameless, Complications, and some of the other stuff that you can see in her film and TV. And she goes all the way back to, one of those Disney shows. God, I've forgotten the name of the one where the Disney kid can see in his premonitions or something like that. Given the fact that she's done this, I think that this could be something of a breakout role for her, where she moves into something that's more adult and at the same time is in bitch girl roles. So, the prefect. Oh my God, man, did I get a shock when I went to go look at this guy's IMDb. Holy crap. It is John Rubinstein, or Rubinstein, I'm not sure which. His IMDb is presently 1967 to 2019 with 211 acting credits, so he is a worker. He has done multiple TV series with multiple recurring roles. I didn't see any regulars, but many recurring roles. And his first gig was in Dragnet 1967 in an episode called The Grenade, which, as it happens, is one that I have watched, and it is here on YouTube, so there is a link in my description box below where you can watch it. I did not watch it after I saw this episode, just didn't have the time, so I don't know that I would be able to pick him out. He also has 29 composer credits, dating all the way back to the film Patty in 1970. He has done almost exclusively television, including in the composer credits, and his IMDb is fantastically long. is, again, he got 211 acting credits. It's not a show record, but it's a hell of a lot. Try scrolling through. I just scroll. Seen Rubenstein many times over the years. Yeah, he's a relatively familiar face. I was just amazed at how long the IMDb was, and the fact that he had all these composer credits along with it. So, hey. And despite the fact that he's been around forever, he has won no awards. Now, he plays just the prefect here. Why doesn't this guy have a name? This is something where you think these people would have names. He does a very good performance. He does a great performance. He is first a guy eager to see what's out there. Again, as science fiction fans who have the dream, I love that part of your performance. And then he does a completely convincing heel turn. He is not really a bad guy, though. He is just extremely religious and thinks that he's doing the right thing, both for himself and for his entire society. Again, gotta wonder about dragging off alien dignitaries to your own concentration camps. That's one where it should just be, okay, we're done with this dinner until you get these guys off of here, off of our planet and gone. And then we're going to check whether you guys have any problems. That, that's the sort of thing where I would have done if I'd been writing this. Because there's just too much danger. These guys don't appear to have anything like surface-to-space missiles or anything like that. Just a question of, what if the people that you're throwing into the concentration camps, what if they're just not quite as goody two-shoes as they make out to be, and they say to you, give us back our people, or we will start nuking you from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. Then there's the category I kind of throw everybody else into, because there was a lot of everybody else. There were the extras. There were people who were playing minor characters with just a few lines. There are a lot of them. Might give a shout out to, and I forgot to write down the actor's name, the guy who plays the concentration camp commandant. When he says that he feels sorry for Kelly, and she says, "I feel sorry for your wife." Great moment. I liked him. He seemed like the sort of complete hard-nosed a-hole guy that you would expect to find in charge of a concentration camp. I did think it was kind of fun to see Ted Danson as Admiral Perry. Ted Danson is obviously getting older from when he was in Cheers. He's worked continuously, I checked. But he's a face that might be a little difficult for you to know, or hell, for younger viewers who are barely post-millennial. You may not have ever seen him before. I remember him, of course, in Cheers, but people who are younger might not know the guy at all. Speak softly and carry a big stick, says Larry. Or, in the immortal words of Yosemite Sam, oh yeah, well I speak loudly, and I carry a bigger stick, and I use it too. That was an actual line in a Yosemite Sam Bugs Bunny cartoon one time. Director on this one, Robert Duncan McNeill, a name that should be very, very well known to Star Trek Voyager fans. His IMDb is presently 1981 to 2019 with 44 director credits, 2 of which are for the Orville. The first one was Command Performance last year. He's also done 21 episodes of Chuck, 14 episodes of Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce, and 4 episodes of Star Trek Voyager, which was not his first directing credits. He also has 29 acting credits. His last credited gig was in 2012. Now, he'd been directing for quite a long time. He'd been directing since before Star Trek Voyager, but after 2012, he seems to have completely quit acting and moved exclusively into directing. He's the sort of guy that now he's a bit heavier, where he had been playing, sort of a good-looking, almost leading man kind of guy on Voyager. Not so much now, but that's not a problem. The barracks were intentionally made to look like Nazi concentration camps. Yep, absolutely. They absolutely were. I'll talk about that when I get to the production design. But yes, those were Nazi concentration camps that looked exact. I saw them, and the first thing I thought of was Hogan's Heroes, which nobody but people my age are going to remember. But the TV series Hogan's Heroes was the first thing I thought of. I almost expected somebody to go over and pound on one of the bunk beds and have the thing come up. But yeah, they were definitely made to look like that. Robert Duncan McNeil has 170 episodes of Star Trek Voyager under his belt, as well as 17 episodes of Going to Extremes with quite a number of other things. Again, going all the way back to 1981. He has won an award, the New York International Independent Film and Video Festival Award in 1999, Best Short Film for The Battery. Now, his direction. His direction tends to suffer from the original series problem. And again, there is a link to that below if you want to take a look at what I've said about the original series problem and why it's a problem that plagues all modern directors of science fiction in general, but certainly this show. This is particularly when Kalea announces this message they've got coming on the bridge. Yes, he played Tom Paris in Star Trek Voyager. That's exactly right, Larry. He played Tom Paris in Voyager. 170 episodes, basically all of them. As again, this I've mentioned before, one of the things they tended to do right in Star Trek, the original series, is directors would frame shots where you'd be able to see actors in the background, oftentimes between main characters during important moments. And I always said that if the Enterprise has a rumor mill, the head of the rumor mill is Mr. Leslie, because Mr. Leslie is always sitting between, he's practically always, if you got two characters sitting here, he's right in between them. And he will always react to what's going on. If the characters are saying something crazy, he'll be looking over and just like, oh my God, We need to see more of that here, and particularly when Kalea announced the message and said what it said. Everyone on the bridge should have immediately perked up and turned around to react at that. And not just Gordon, because he got the lines. I mean, everybody on the bridge should have said, whoa, what? That would have been a big, big reaction moment for everybody on that bridge, and it didn't happen. After the Orville crew lands, there should be no planetary inhabitants who just stroll by. Everybody should be stopping to stare. There were lots of moments where they're walking along with the prefect and there's all these people in the background and they're just acting like everything's normal. No! God, no. Everybody should be stopping to stare. People who have babies and strollers, and there were quite a bunch of them, should be taking those babies out, going, look, honey, look, see the aliens? Because that's what I do. As a parent, I know that's exactly what I do. Because I would be saying later on in those kids' lives, even if I knew they wouldn't remember it as infants, I would say, yeah, you were there. You got to see them, in person. I know you don't remember, but damn, it was very cool. Larry says, Leela had dirt on all the bridge officers. Leslie had dirt on all the bridge officers. Yes. Yeah, in Star Trek, the original series, he very much did. Like I say, I've said before, say it again, he's the guy who would be listening to the leads saying, we're going to go back in time or something crazy like that. And he'd be immediately on you never saw him do it, but I could just imagine, either immediately after he walked into the turbo lift to go down to the rec room, or maybe even when he's on duty, looking around, pushing the intercom button. Guys, you're not going to believe this. They're going to take us back in time. I can just see it. He's the rumor mill. He is where the rumor mill starts. There was a big crowd that started to gather around the landing, and that was right. They were standing gathered around the landing, and they was watching. But there should at no time have been any point at which anyone in the background was not turning to stare at the aliens. It should have happened in the control room for their big array. When those aliens walk in, everybody should have been turning to watch them. It should have been a point when they're like in the hospital where they're walking down the halls. Everybody turns to watch them, and maybe somebody nudges and goes, hey, dumbass, get back to work. About the only place where you could get away with not doing that would have been in the ER when they were making that C-sect. That was the only place where you could say, okay, these people are going to be so focused and dedicated on what they're doing that they're not going to be suddenly looking at the aliens. because that's a big moment for any civilization. If that happened on Earth, you can only imagine. Everywhere those aliens went, they would constantly be stared at. People would be picking up their children and pointing them out to them. You know, there would be any kids that were walking along with, they would be going, look, it's the aliens. You didn't realize it? You get to see the aliens for the first time. You're one of the first few. You know, it's just, as I say, background people should be allowed to react. There should at no time on that planet be anybody who, when they walk in the door, aren't going to go look at them. That should always happen. Kelly says in the concentration camp that, quote, at least people aren't staring as much. Kelly, I don't know if you noticed, but the only time you got stared at was when you landed. Nobody was staring very much at all. And why do they speak the same language? Yeah, well, that's a bit of techno-babble-ish. You assume that they have universal translators or something like that couched about their person somewhere. You know, only Star Trek Discovery has ever done that any level of justice by putting it into their communicators. But all TV shows do it. Stargate SG-1, the very first time that they went out on a mission, the aliens spoke a different language. After that, they realized that that was not going to work, that it was going to suck up so much time of the episode for them to have to figure out how to learn a new alien language that they just got rid of it. You know, everybody spoke English from that point on. It is in science fiction television and movies oftentimes just something they have to hand-wavium yourself around because, yeah, you're absolutely right. Everybody would be speaking totally different languages. Yeah, Babelfish, as you say, Larry. You know, that was one of the more brilliant things about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was the notion of something like the Babelfish. And, of course, it was used for satiric effect. But at least that made some sense. You know, you can always understand everything you hear in any language. One of the later novels, when they go back because Earth has been miraculously pulled out of an alternate dimension, I think was the plot device. Arthur goes back home, and he takes the Babelfish out of his ear, puts it into a fishbowl, and really only pulls it out whenever he wants to watch a foreign movie, so he can understand what they're saying. But that was funny. But cinematographer on this, as is most case almost all of the time, is Marvin Rush, who did a ton of work on Star Trek. I think the episode suffers a bit, not necessarily because of him, but because we're dealing with Robert Duncan McNeill, who did, to some extent, cut his teeth with Star Trek Voyager. Not the first stuff he did, but he did some of theirs. And Marvin Rush, who did a lot of Star Trek through the Berman era. And so they have a certain way of doing stuff. And the cinematography and direction comes off as pretty much the way the cinematography and direction was in the Berman era. And as I've said before, that's part of the Star Trek, the original series problem. You do not have to keep to those static shots. He did have a few where the camera moved around the bridge a bit, but mostly it was static shots. They showed their language and text displays. I'm not too sure where you're talking about there. Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. Their displays and stuff, their signs and all that, had a different written language. Yeah. But as to why they would speak English, no. Music is again by Joel McNeely. We've heard him several times, if not almost exclusively, on this show so far this season. Okay, I got to give it to him. Did some great music, some big score in places. You know, when they discover they're going to have first contact, it's this nice build-up with the music until they zap out on the quantum drive and come into the planet, out of the quantum drive, and they go down to the planet. And that was nice. I really liked it. It was nice. It was appropriate. It was big. Do not be afraid, Mr. McNeely. Do not be afraid, Joel, to keep doing that. Just keep doing that. This show can support nice, big, bombastic scores like that. Keep doing it. I liked it a lot. Production design, as always, is Stephen Lineweaver. As Larry mentioned, one of the great things about this episode was the concentration camps were made to look exactly like World War II concentration camps. These guys were being kept in what were clearly intended to be analogs of World War II concentration camps. And I thought that worked really well. Did have to wonder about the floorboards. I mean, you know, beyond the fact that, okay, well, we got to do this thing where we're going to, you know, somehow hand-wave him around the fact that nobody notices this woman is pregnant. Man, that kid's really quiet for somebody that's wandering around on top of floorboards above them. I've had 2 kids, and it's hard for me to imagine them staying that quiet the whole time. Larry says McNeil was in the He-Man movie with Courtney Cox. Oh, I didn't know that. I really haven't kept up much on Robert Duncan McNeil's career, either pre or post Voyager. He's Tom Paris for me, and that's really how I remember him. I was a little surprised at all the directing that he had actually done. So, I also think Lena Weaver's reduction design here makes perfect sense. We are seeing, you know, an office for the prefect that looks like something you might see as the Oval Office for the president to some extent. We see a nice big, you know, meeting room or a banquet hall where they're all meeting. We see, you know, the same sets we've been seeing throughout, and they all work. And I thought particularly, you know, those, especially the establishing shots where you get to see an overhead look down on the concentration camp. It is, as Larry says, it is clearly intended to look like a concentration camp from World War II. And I thought that worked well. Now, my only problem with that is I don't know which of it was real and which of it was CGI. No doubt some of it was CGI. And so I guess you hand it to the folks at special effects. I didn't know it was CGI. I'm sure some of it was. It always is these days. You have a fraction of a set that you then build everything around, including buildings, including, you know, even if it's a shot that you think doesn't need it, there's still going to be CGI around to build it into something bigger. It always happens, and I have no way to tell what it is anymore. Speaking of visual effects, well, Luke McDonald is credited as the visual effects supervisor. It was actually an army that involved, in fact, 2 different special effects houses. I call him out solely because his title is visual effects supervisor. The visual effects, as usual, were great throughout. I totally bought everything that went on. You know, the cities looked like cities where they must have been doing CGI to add on to shot locations, either on a backlot or on a set somewhere. They were seamless. I didn't know what they were, couldn't tell what they were. It was all fine, with one exception, and that exception was the array. To me, from almost any angle, that array looked CGI. Wish it hadn't, but that is one I can call out because to me that one did not look real. So, costume designer, as always, the somewhat flamboyant Joseph A. Perot. You know, I thought his costumes were fine. There is one thing that I would call out here, one thing. The crew should be wearing dress uniforms when they go down for first contact. Not their everyday uniforms. They should have some kind of dress uniform. You know, something that is there for formal occasions. And he should have come up with dress uniforms for them. And furthermore, Kalea's weaponry. She's just got the usual blaster on her hip. That should have been intended as much more formal. You know, I don't know how you do it, but I mean, like today's military, maybe you have some gold piping or gold, you know, ropes over one arm, and she's carrying a different weapon than you usually see, as what amounts to an honor guard. That's the sort of thing you would see in modern day society. You would not go down, certainly not for a first contact, armed to the teeth. Made sense that nobody but her was wearing it, but there should have been dress uniforms, and there should have been something there that indicated this is just an honor guard. This is not for us to use these weapons. This is just an honor guard. So, yep, the alien city looked like a good alien city. Yes, it was as always with this show. It was still bright. It was still indicative of a civilization that had advanced to this point, and we're moving on up in the world. And I like that a lot about this show. It is why this show is Star Trek, and STD is not. There is no lightness of that kind anywhere in the show. Everything is always dark and horrible and awful and mean and rotten. Oh, I can't wait to see what happens when we go to the star base in there. Makeup on this, it's a team, as always. There's really no good way to call out anybody. I have to tell you, I was so relieved with what they did with Kalea's hair. Much as I like Delara, you know, I hated that hairstyle. It was there to make her look intentionally much younger than the actress was. And all of the members of her species had the exact same type of haircut, so we could see both of their elf-like ears. Thank you, makeup team, for doing something different with that race's hairstyles. Thank you so much. We do not constantly have to see those ears to be reminded that they have them. We don't even have to see both of them. You can put her hair down just like Kelly's, and it will be fine with me. That is largely the end of the review. So, at the end of this review, we can ask ourselves, is it any good? Hell yes, yeah. This is a good episode. It is, again, a decent enough introduction for our new security officer. You know, there is that big, for me, cringe moment of a planetary based on astrology, because that's just so stupid. But again, it was offset by the fact that we had this first contact, which I loved everything about. Everything that they did with respect to that was so good and exactly what I want to see, and so massively different than what you see in STD. And frankly, that sort of thing has been missing sometimes in Star Trek for quite a while. You know, when they got into the movies, it was less about the exploration. So for them to be getting back to this exploration feel and having the dream, you know, continues to prove that this show is Star Trek and STD is not. So yes, definitely do watch this. You know, try to explain away in your mind that the whole notion of civilization based on astrology is ridiculous in the extreme. There are so many things that wouldn't work about that. You know, when you get to a certain scientific level, you can't progress any further unless you come to the conclusion that the stars and the planets move a certain way, and they have precisely squat to do with anything except the way that they move with respect to your location. You know, you are the one doing the moving, and they're the ones that are largely stationary, and they're not even that. You know, over 8,000 or so years, which is when they say that the black hole became a black hole and one of the stars disappeared. Well, over those 8,000 years, the stars moved their positions. Not a ton, but if you've been watching them as closely as they have, the stars have changed their position. They have moved in the sky because they are also in motion. Larry says, now the left politicians are saying the world will end in 12 years unless we do what they say. Sound familiar? Like another rerun. Interesting that you'd mentioned that. In terms of what I'm going to talk about in a minute. But I do want to say something about, I'm going to put you on hold on that one and talk about that in a second. Yes, that... what is it, Anastasia Ortega-Cortez, or whoever the hell she is. What a friggin' moron. Word about STD. Because, of course, I watched that. Interestingly enough, by the way, near as I can tell, the screeners for both STD and for the Orville are actually available like 24 hours in advance of them airing. So, I mean, if you want to see something like that, it's BitTorrent. Oh, excuse me. Last night's episode of Star Trek Discovery, I'm not going to talk about it long. I hate it. I did not find New Eden horrible the way that I have generally found this show horrible. I found it generally okay. I hope that they are not going to go up meeting something like God on this show. I am also, I mean, the thing about religion in Star Trek is Gene Roddenberry was a very confirmed atheist. When he and Majel Barrett got married, they were doing it. They did it in, I believe, a Shinto ceremony, and that's solely because they were in Japan at the time. They had, he had no religious belief, and it bled over into Star Trek quite a lot. We do not see religion in Star Trek. The only 2 times that we see a wedding, it is clearly very non-denominational. So that was something that was Gene Roddenberry's. So I don't mind that Pike appears to be somewhat religious. I'm rather terribly afraid that that means that the producers of this program are going to make fun of him because, like everyone else in Hollywood, that wretched hive of scum and villainy, they disdain anyone having to do with religion. Now, as anybody who watches the show for very long knows, I am an atheist, but I am not an atheist with a chip on my shoulder. There are atheists who have chips on their shoulders, and frankly, I wish they would shut the hell up because they make the rest of us look bad. But I hope they don't take that direction with it. What I am very, very afraid is that they are going to show us that Spock and Burnham were either in a romantic or sexual relationship. I am very, very afraid that that is what is going to happen. Larry says, from horrible to okay, not a ringing endorsement. No, this is definitely not an endorsement of that show. I found a lot that was very cringeworthy about it, and a lot that I didn't like about it. But at least they knew what General Order Number 1 was. Somebody read about that anyway. Whoever's doing this has read a little bit of Star Trek history. Not very much, but a little bit. But yeah, I'm really afraid that we're going to find out that Spock had sex with Burnham. And guys, did you have to put Spock in a mental institution? I mean, why? Just why? Aside from going, ooh, it's so edgy to frack around with beloved characters. No, God, no. It seems so out of character in so many different ways that I just hated that part of it. The rest of it was okay. There was at least a little exploring strange new worlds, even if it was a very dark, strange new world all the time. And, at least they did understand the concept of General Order Number 1. But then we get to Spock being in a mental institution. Then we get Burnham indicating that there was something so horribly wrong that the way they left their relationship they hadn't spoken to again for years. And this is going to apparently motivate why Sarek didn't speak to Spock for over, 10 years? Something like that in the original series. It's going to be because they had sex. I'm just sure of it. Maybe they could read the Star Trek Concordance. We can hope. Why would they do that? They don't care. They're just turning Star Trek into something that's edgy and dumb. It is why, just in the last 2 episodes last night, or the day before if you happen to look hard, I didn't look hard. From now I am going to look hard. 1080p's of these both were available according to the date stamps and a full 24 hours before this show aired. I don't know how that happens, but it did. Yeah, I don't think they're going to read anything. They don't care. They're just taking what we know as Star Trek and saying, let's frack around with it for a while. Let's totally screw up Spock's story arc for his entire life. Let's put in perfect Michael Berman, who can never do anything wrong and has no character flaws, and is always showing up everybody, including dressing down the captain on the bridge of his own ship in front of everybody in the universe, which is stupid. But yeah. It's why just these 2 episodes alone, the Orville is Star Trek and STD is not. So I do sort of have a bit of news and commentary, and this is kind of big stuff. As of Monday, I am making a dramatic change in the format of my show. Tales from SYL Ranch is going to change to basically political commentary with a new tagline of news and commentary from the heartland. I will be uploading pre-recorded videos, 15 minutes or less in length, in which I will generally comment on issues of the day at least once a week, and potentially more, potentially quite a lot more, if current events demand it. In fact, I already have a topic regarding freedom of speech that will drop on Monday. I will occasionally hold live streams when I accumulate enough viewers to make it seem appropriate. I know I've talked about this before, I've tried it, but this time I really mean it. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Some of it is current events. Some of it is how I think the press is now actively agitating for civil war, and I think I need to be at the forefront. As I mentioned last week, if they actually get what they want, I'm going to make it my mission in life to make sure that people in my part of the country who make their food starve them out. And so I want to be at the forefront of that. The other reason is, as a result of pushing some of my commentary clips, I'm seeing a significant uptick in both my subscribers to the channel and followers on social media. And after doing this show for more than 2 years now, my channel views, my views and my subs remain very small. In fact, in YouTube terms, you could only call this show a complete bust. And there are reasons for this, for it not being successful. And I understand them. To be successful in this space, you must be some combination of young, attractive, female, or a gamer, and I am none of the above. And also my long-form reviews are too much for an audience that has been trained to have an attention span of 15 minutes or less, preferably 10 minutes or less. And in addition, there's the fact that these reviews take a lot of time. I'm currently spending upwards of 16 hours per week on this, in fact. And I also have behind the scenes some personal issues, most of which are financial, that I'm not going to discuss, that are demanding a lot more of my time and would cut into what I can do for prep work on this. And while I do love all of my loyal viewers, and that certainly includes you, Larry, you've been there always for me, doing commentary in short-form videos that are easier to produce and where my age is an asset rather than a deficit, which it is in doing these reviews. These reviews, my age is an absolute deficit, and this was brought home to me when I went to sign up for a health club, because I signed up for one that was relatively inexpensive at a local college. The girl who signed me up for it made some assumptions about my age that I did not disabuse her of. She thought I was a senior citizen. I have not yet quite reached that status. Clearly, however, people see me as much older, and that is a problem in this space. Hey, SuperCrew63, you're here too. Glad to see you. Glad to see you. And you've always been here for me as well. You've both always been here for me, and I have very much appreciated that. I really do. And I hope that you will continue to follow me, subscribe, support me, even after the format changed. I had, in fact, considered changing to short-form reviews. And as Larry says, average person has the attention of a tsetse fly. That's exactly right. And unfortunately, in terms of short-form reviews, well, there's already about 1.21 giga YouTubers who are already in that space, most of whom are combinations of young, attractive, female, and gamers. And so there is literally nothing to particularly distinguish me. And, you know, it's hammered home from time to time, as I said, when I went to apply for that membership and discovered that it was only going to be $22 a month because the college girl sitting behind the desk did not bother to ask for an ID to discover what my age was, nor did she even ask. She just assumed that I was a senior citizen. That's how they see me. SuperGuru60T says, I qualified for senior discount, and I'm only 1 year older than you. Yeah, that's where well, it varies in terms of who does what, senior citizen discounts. But yes, 55 is where the line cutoff is, but she didn't even bother to ask. Didn't even bother to ask. Took one look at me and said, in her head said, senior citizen, must be. He's old. However, with this format change, I am a libertarian, and I know and I understand that nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. I think you'll find that I'm going to be able to provide some insight into current events that you will not be able to find anywhere else. It's the same sort of thing that I have done when I do ranting about this, that, or the other thing. I'm going to do those sorts of rants. It's just that I'm going to do them in 10 to 15 minute pre-dropped videos. And again, I would certainly hope that you guys would, follow me over there. I'd really, really deeply enjoy it if you did. One thing about that is my production values will also increase. I have been limited to only 10 frames per second because I am streaming. However, my hardware will support recording at 30 frames per second, so that will be one of the nice things. My hardware can also support animated backgrounds on my green screen, and I have one picked out for it, as well as insets into that green screen, so I can put up pictures in the corners where you would kind of expect that to happen on such a show. So my production values will be able to go up like that. I cannot do it right now. That would completely blow up the hardware, and 10 frames per second wouldn't even be possible then. Check it out. Thank you very much, Larry. Again, it's going to be a lot like the sorts of things that I talk about when I have news and commentary here. And as I say, next week, I already have one planned for Monday that will be about freedom of speech, freedom of expression. I can tease it a little bit because of what happened with PragerU just today. We are, well, I don't want to blow all the content, put it this way, we are starting to see the rise of the corporate censor, the corporate censorship rather than government censorship, but it being ultimately the same thing. Now, I won't be completely abandoning science fiction, fantasy, superheroes, etc. So, for example, when STD inevitably portrays Spock and Michael Burnham as either having had a romantic and very likely sexual relationship, I will be screaming about it at the top of my lungs. If a show like The Orville does something very, very right, like they did tonight, or even if they do something very, very wrong, I will talk about that. And where science fiction intersects other commentary, such as the fact that Hollywood is a wretched hive of scum and villainy that produces nothing but horror in our pop culture, I will discuss that. And in fact, I think that will probably play a little better with a larger audience who's more interested in those kind of issues. I can come to them and say, hey, look, here's maybe something you hadn't thought about. All of our entertainment comes from a place where people only know horror in their lives. Maybe that'll fly a little better. Larry says, when I order fast food on the drive-through speaker, they automatically have the senior citizen discount included when I reach the window to pay. I never even asked for it or told them my age. Yeah, I've reached that point. And it is clearly a deficit in terms of doing this show. While I love you guys being there, I love you guys being here. Don't get me wrong. I have been thrilled. But the fact is, my age and long-form reviews are clearly a deficit in terms of trying to grow a real audience. It's not much a wide audience, a big audience. You guys are a real audience. I shouldn't have said that, but a wide audience. And I think that some of the stuff that I have to say on that regard will probably, even when it intersects things like, science fiction and superheroes and things like that, I think those that sort of thing will also play better to a larger audience. And I will also have things to say, like about these fools on the internet who think that Thanos did the right thing in Avengers Infinity War by murdering half the population of the universe. And yes, there are actually people who believe that. They're all over YouTube. You can find them. And I will talk about that. But again, I think that will play that particular part of it where things intersect, where science fiction intersects with real life and real world types of, attitudes will play better to a larger audience. Larry says, you like the live format. Yeah, the problem is, again, I don't want to talk about it too much. It has to do with financial issues and how much time the show takes up and when I do this and how that's impacting some of that. So they're going to be dropped. They're going to be pre-recorded and dropped. But again, I will have, once I reach a point where I've got an adequate number of subscribers, like every other YouTuber does this, I will, schedule live streams that will not necessarily be about any given topic in particular, but one where we can just converse about things, as many people do. For this, although I will not be screaming the way that she does, I look at Jessie Milestone from Mindless Entertainment, who obviously benefits from some of the things I talked about in terms of being a young, attractive female gamer. She has a combination of those things that I don't. But there are people my age who are making it in this space and do the same thing, where they hold live streams after they have adequate number of subscribers such that they can see, additional things scrolling through and have a more back and forth dialogue. So I have to thank you guys again, my very loyal viewers and supporters, and you've given me both a ton of emotional and financial support over the last 2 years. You have been an utter joy to have on my channel and in my live streams, and I hope that you will continue to watch and support me even after this format change. Who knows, maybe I'll start to hate it, but I think at this point, if I'm going down to the amount of time that I need to be spending on this for other things to work out in my life, that maybe I won't. The last time I tried this, I was trying to do it full-time, coming in every day, doing something horrible about the news. No, I can't do that. But if I pick a topic, 2, 3, maybe even 5 times a week, depends on how bad things are, I might be able to, stomach that if I was doing it for 10 minutes or so. Thank you, Larry, about doing what I got to do. Yeah, there are a number of things going on, and not just, the fact that I operate on significant deficits in terms of making the show grow, but also that, there are things going on back in the background that you don't know about, and I'm not going to talk about. So I guess at this point, I might throw up something like this.
Say, pardon me, but could you help out a fellow American who's down on his luck? Hit the road!
So if you've liked what I've done so far, if you think that you might like what I'm going to do in the future, please do like this video, subscribe, do hit the notification bell. That will definitely alert you to when I start uploading content, which will be Monday for sure. And of course, tell all your friends, family, neighbors, pets, and livestock to do the same. Now, in terms of contributions, well, I am now crowdfunding via Subscribestar. And I have a link to that in my description below. I think it's the first one. However, be aware, I will only receive payouts when I have 5 active subscribers and $150 in a balance. I am taking a chance on this, that the new format will attract more viewers. It seems to have been successful. I pushed that video. Nothing you see in the press is real, nothing this week, because of things that were going on in the press for the last couple of weeks, and saw a real big uptick on Twitter. I now have a presence on Facebook, much as it pains me, but I know that I need to have that kind of engagement, whether I like it or not. I just have to keep telling myself, this is just for advertising purposes. Do not get involved in anything. This is just for advertising purposes. Post and do nothing else. This is just for advertising purposes. So I do have a presence there now. And I would certainly suggest you support me. Even though I'm crossing my fingers hoping for the best on Subscribestar, I would still suggest supporting me there, because we can bring about Patreon's well-deserved, even economic death just that much faster. You can also contribute to my PayPal tip jar. As always, go to my website, www.wrstone.com, to see my Amazon wish list, which, as always, will contain that laptop. And now, while my new format will make my production values increase sort of automatically because it's not streaming, it's still going to be limited in many ways. For example, I will only be limited, really I've tried it, I'll only be limited to 720p at 30 frames per second. My cam that I'm looking at right now is capable of 1080p at 60 frames per second. My equipment, however, is not capable of recording at that rate. And also, if I'm going to do 10 to 15 minute videos, oh man, I got to tell you, my equipment will take hours to encode a 15-minute video. With better equipment, it would be a matter of minutes. The laptop would simply make me jump ahead by light years. And if you actually buy the thing, as is always in the case, you get to become program director of the show, tell me exactly what to talk about and when to talk about it. And if you don't buy it, and I certainly don't expect anybody to, any financial contributions will accrue until such time as I can buy it. And again, you can see all of this at my website at www.wrstone.com. Must always thank my viewers who have contributed. As I've said before, one of the contributions I'm working here using it on right now as part of my part of the studio. And any financial contributions will accrue until I can get my laptop. I have been really, really thrilled that anybody has thought that my opinions have been worth anything, both on the artistic side. I hope that going forward you'll think my opinions in terms of what I have to say on news and issues of the day will also be worth something, and that you will still find it worth supporting me after I do that change. So let us hope. While I am not 100% thrilled with having to make this decision, it is unfortunately a decision I'm going to make. And I really do think that when it comes down to it, you're going to see, some libertarian perspective. My intention, I will drop, after I'm done here, I will drop my new opening. It is less than 20 seconds long, because you can't have an opening as long as mine and expect to hold the attention of anybody with the attention of a tsetse fly. So I'll drop that when I'm done. You can take a look at it. But my intention there is very much to give you a perspective that you will not hear out of people who are basically based out of the America's coasts or one of America's large metropoli. This is going to be where I am talking about stuff from my perspective as a libertarian, as a perspective from somebody who lives in the central part of the world that everybody calls flyover country. I will be also attempting to disabuse people of the notion that, we're all hicks and rubes here. So I think, you'll probably be able to find that I have something useful to say. That is certainly my hope. And you will see me pushing things a lot more on social media than I have in the past. Because I'm doing Twitter and Facebook again, much as I detest those sites. However, I may take a cue from Tim Pool. He is pretty much cutting out of Twitter, and I understand why. This last week, I think, God knows, one of the many places that I kept pushing that video, Nothing You See in the Press is Real, Nothing, was in many. See, that's the thing. What you have to do if you're going to really push this stuff is you have to go out and look at hashtags and find out what the big hashtags are for something that you want to drop. And then go out to anyone with a significant number of views of their tweets or retweets and drop it in. And I have been doing that with Tim Pool, piggybacking off of that guy. I think maybe he's finally started to realize that the press is actually nothing real. And give him a little push, a little bit more of a push, and maybe he will. But I've been able to piggyback off of him to a large extent. And he's trying to get out of Twitter because he has finally realized, after that whole thing went down with that Native American out on the, at the Lincoln Memorial, and the, I've forgotten the guys who were yelling racial slurs and all that, that the press had completely blown it. They are continuing to blow it. Some of them have continued to double down on it, even though it's totally wrong, it's totally false. And he's come to the conclusion that I did a long time ago, that Twitter is toxic and a purveyor of crap. But to push a show, you do need to be out there, and you do need, at least in the beginning, to be piggybacking off of people like him, to find his popular videos and simply piggyback off of them. So that's what I'm doing. So that would be, I guess, all the time that we have today, boys and girls. So tune in on Monday for the show's new format, Tales from SYL Ranch, news and commentary from the Heartland. Until Monday, this is Tales from SYL Ranch, the vlogcast that until then is reminding you, and possibly after, to always know where your towel is. And I'm your host, Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.